Geriatrics, all right? Now, you guys know Erickson, right? And you know you have to know Erickson for various different tests. But this one is not something I think that we as a student body is really well versed in, because we always do the kids. But I think it's really important that you know the one for the 60-year-old and up. It is, and I want you to write it across the top, ego integrity versus despair. Now you'll hear me go through this fast, but you gotta keep in mind that this is all gonna be recorded. So you roll when you can roll, when you can't roll, you can't roll. So, it's a rough day. My husband missed the plane, y'all, to Oakland and still waiting. Now he in Atlanta doing stupid shit, going around about in 3 different planes. Y'all pray for that brother. And if the Browns don't win, it's a hot ass mess. Because you missed the plane for that, okay. Now, so, Oakland, don't come home beat up. So, girl, I told him, don't you wear shit brown or orange. Really? Why? Late like that? My people. All right. Ego integrity versus despair. And so what you're doing is you're understanding what that really means. Ego integrity, ego, right? Kind of like a bad word, but not in this situation. Ego integrity is where you reach 60 some odd years old and you start reflecting, what was my life all about? What did it mean? What were my relationships about? You know, that little commercial that says, when you leave from here, it won't matter how many cars you had, how many houses. What will matter is who you knew and who knew you, and what they say at your funeral, right? They don't usually say she had 14 cars, do they? No. So you start to really go and reflect back on what was it all about anyway. And so if you can look back and feel fairly decent about your relationship with your spouse, your mom, your kids, your siblings, then you are not going to be in despair. Typically that person is not lonely. Typically that person is not depressed. Typically that person is not any of the things that add up to despair. Because remember, it's ego integrity versus despair. Now what adds to feelings of despair is the fact that when you reflect back, it doesn't look so pretty. Maybe you were not a great mom. Maybe you were absent dad. Maybe you are in a nursing facility and no one ever visits. And you start to think, I guess I know why. You know what I'm saying? So you become really in despair. So your reflection on how much you're dependent on other persons can also add to despair. It's no fun to have to rely on somebody to wipe your bottom. Trust me, I would imagine that was pretty horrible. It's no fun to not be able to drive anymore. Driving for the elderly is huge. Okay, so the dependency on another person, of course, is going to make that up as well. And then, of course, there's this thing where I believe you start in your 50s, because it's already happening to me. This is like this point in your life where you go, oh, I got fewer years ahead of me than I had behind me. Like, one day I'm going to die. That sucks. I always wanted to live to 300. So you get this sense of mortality, where you start thinking about, wow, I'm going to die. I wonder how I'll die. I wonder if I'll be in pain. I wonder how long I'll live. I want to leave my grandson, my granddaughter. You know, you start thinking about that. And if you get too wrapped up into it, you build up a sense of despair. So relationships are more important. I think my husband gives a very poignant story on this end. He was a nurse doing a chemo infusion in Beechwood at a penthouse that was huge, looked like a little city. And a very nice gentleman at that with cancer, just a really nice guy. He had a skimpily clad girl in the kitchen who he called his boo thing, not wife. And so he said to my husband, because if you know anything about chemo infusions, they take hours. And so his took 12. So he had plenty of time to bond with his patient. So as he sat there, the patient said, you know, young man, let me tell you some advice. He said, I would give all of my convertibles, my little historical vehicles, my Porsches, I would give it all away to have a wife who really loved me, that would sit by me through these really hard days of cancer. He said, I would give anything in the world to have that wife back that I just cheated on and I mistreated and I was not a good person. And she was. And right now I feel it. Don't be like me. It's not about things. It's really not. As much as you always want to be comfortable in life, it's just not about things. And there he was, filthy rich, billionaire, in a penthouse, reflecting in despair that this bimbo in the kitchen, or whatever was going on with that, I don't know. She doesn't love him, is what he told my husband. She's just a flavor of the month. And she knows it. She likes me for my money, I like her for her skirt. What are you gonna do? That was deep. Charles said, I'll never forget it. Because this is reflecting. This man was 78, and his days were numbered, and he didn't like the number of days left, and how he intended to spend them. And I think about my papa, who had his wife at his side and would kill before she left his side. I think about the 68 years of marriage and the dinners and the lunches and the breakfasts. I think about the family events. I think about the deck on Sundays. I think about the football games. I think about, and I'm thinking he left here a happy man. That's what you gotta remember for these patients, okay? Because when you're dealing with them in this long-term care facility, they may be indeed in despair and therefore angry with you for no reason. Maybe acting out against you for no reason. Maybe clinging to you for no reason, maybe ringing the bell every 5 minutes for no reason. Maybe just so happy you're nice and want to see you come in the room quite often because you are the nicest. You have to think about that, okay? Now, as we move forward with geriatrics, which is actually kind of easy, the most important thing you want to know is the big issue with geriatrics is mobility. So your biggest goal for this patient is mobility. Keep them moving. I always have to give a shout out to my sister-in-law, which is really my sister, because my mama-in-law, which is really my mama, she makes her move. Put that walker down. You don't need that walker. Come on, Mom. And she does need her walker. She doesn't want her to get the walker. No, you don't need that. Come on, I got you. Get up, Mom. Let's go walk. You got to do it just like that. Because when they stay still, then they die. When they stay still, then they die. Now that mobility is such a big deal that you are interested in anything that could affect it. So you are checking their feet for ulcers and sores, because that can lead to an amputation. And what do we know about amputation? 2 years from the day they're dead. You are doing your false precautions, because when people fall, they get a broken hip. When they break their hip, 1 in 5 will be dead 1 year later. The other 4 will die by 2 years. It's a rarity to survive it. That's what I need y'all to know. Okay, so mobility. Keep this person active. You'll see me fuss at you on lunch break. Get up, walk, no DVTs allowed. Right? So let's go, chop, chop, okay? All right, then you have to think about the activities of daily living, right? You have to think about, what do they do every day? It's called a functional assessment. Write that on the front there. Functional assessment. Can they do things? Are they able to pretty much independently do things? This is different from most assessments because you're going to have to assess whether or not family is nearby. Now, this is the rarest country of all in which we don't have our family making our elderly their priority. They live in Alaska, and that's where the hell they're gonna stay despite their mothers in Florida. You would never see that in any other country in this world. It just would not exist. It doesn't happen that way. So you're going to have a lot of families like that where their continents part and shit is crazy. Is this even a priority for the daughter or the son, how their mother or their father is doing? The best time to assess the proximity of family is when you can do something about it. So this should start in your 50s and 60s in retirement. So where does your daughter live again? How likely is it that you might be able to move closer to her? Or she might come closer to you? What do you think? What, in other words, could happen, would happen in the event that you really needed a little extra help in the house, and really you know we only trust our children? What would you do? How would that play out? Start now. Okay, start when they're younger, like in their 50s and 60s. Proximity of family, functional assessments, foot care, foot exams. What's my rule? Take the shoes and the socks off every single visit. I'm an OBGYN, and I make my diabetics take their shoes and socks off at every single visit. I don't even do feet, but I do those feet because we know what that means with the diabetic. Okay, so you got it. All right, so you got it. Hip fracture, immobility, falls precautions. Even though we all know what they are, let's make sure, oh, let me tell you to put some other cute stuff on the front that I know you will be really good to know, glad to know. Remember what we said in class a while back? We said baby boomers, right? We said those were the years of what? Because I barely made it, and maybe some books say I didn't. What were the people born in between those years?
1945 and 1966.
Yes, and for some books it'll say 1946 and 64, so you can just flip the number, 46, 64, if you forget on the test. Okay, so 46, 64. So some books say I didn't make it. If it suits me, I made it. If it doesn't, I didn't. That's how you do it. So, but my brother for sure made it because he's born a year, 9 months before me. So in that case, the baby boomers, listen to this, I think you will find that it impacts you. 10,000 people every day in this country turn 65. 10,000 people every day, I didn't say week, I said every day, become 65 years old. So that means that those are all patients that are potentially going to grace your path, which is why you keep hearing about a nursing shortage. Because I'm sorry, we don't crank out 10,000 nurses a day, but each one of those patients have the potential of needing a nurse, okay? So you got this is big for you, okay? Now, so when we look at this list and we think about false precautions, well, we have to make sure we know who's at risk for falls. So I want you to turn to that page that says, what's a good page for that? Let's do osteoporosis. Because you know if you fall with that, you're going to be breaking your hip. Now, so we have osteoporosis, and sometimes we forget that actually osteoporosis is seen in men as well as women. But we're just doing false precautions on this little page at the bottom, if you could. We know that 1 in 3 will fall after age 65. We already know that. We know what we have to do. We have to keep the bed low, the brake on, the call light within reach. We know that. We know that the more this patient walks and stays mobile, the less falls they'll have. So they need to walk every single day with a minimum of 3 times a week, but every day would be better. Remember when you walk, it's called weight bearing. It builds your bone. It literally, with every step you take, it builds your bone. It increases your strength, your coordination, and your balance. Just walking. We know we need night lights, clutter-free environment, well-lit areas, no throw rugs. All other carpet or rugs must be secured very nicely to the floor. What's on the sides of the toilet? Grab bars. Hallways must have side rails. Stairways must have side rails. Remember to encourage assistive or adaptive devices. Regular eye exams and hearing checks. Please remember that if you were to put the side rails up ×4, that would be a restraint. We don't do that anymore. Back in my day we did. We don't do that anymore, and indeed, if you put them up at all, you have to have gotten consent or a waiver signed. And there's only sometimes that it makes sense to put them up. I'll give you the best example of when it makes sense to have them up. Seizure precautions, right? So you know, if you have seizure precautions, that would be different. But ordinarily, you're not about to do that. That's not going to make sense, okay? Now, little small pets are a risk, but if you tried to take Batman and not Robin from me, then I would have to hurt you. You cannot have my dogs. But they do make you really at risk for falling. But why don't you want to take their doggies? Because pets are some of the best suicide prevention. And this patient may be lonely and may be depressed, and you never know. This pet is giving her a reason to get up in the morning and walk. Oh, okay. So we're not trying to take nobody's babies. Now, what you do have to remember is if they suddenly, like Papa did when he had lung cancer, if they suddenly want to get this grandiose idea of getting a little dog, the answer is, probably not. But I'll tell Shelly to bring hers over more. So dissuade them, right? Discourage them from getting a pet if they don't already have one. How many have ran down the steps with the dog and almost fell with the dog and all this other kind of, yeah, you know, you're young. So you can imagine what somebody on a walker would do. So just know this pet thing is, kind of hard. Now, who is at risk? Well, anybody over 65 is at risk for falling. Anyone with polypharmacy. What does polypharmacy mean? A lot of meds. Technically, probably somewhere around 4 or 5, anywhere from 4 to 8 meds is polypharmacy, 4 to 8 meds and more. So too many doggone medications. And you know why, right? Because they have side effects, all of them. And you just remember what you had to know about blood pressure meds. Rise slowly. And then just if they didn't even have those medications, just being an older person, their blood vessels are not as flexible and as strong as ours. So it takes a while for the blood to go all over the body when you first get up, if you've been sitting more than an hour. So you know yourself, you gotta be careful with these meds. The meds make you dizzy, they can make your blood pressure drop as you get up too fast. They can make you fall in the shower. What happens in the shower? Vasodilation, warm water, yeah. I'll put this down. History of previous fall is one of the highest risks you can have for a fall. History of previous fall. You knew that. Also, you have to remember the patient that has some vision impairment or hearing impairment is at high risk for falling. If they have any kind of chronic neurological disorder, maybe they had a history of strokes, maybe they had a history of multiple sclerosis, lupus maybe. Here's one, arthritis, chronic problems. The patient on diuretics has to go to the bathroom fast. And that is sometimes a big deal, jumping up, trying to go to the bathroom fast. The patient who's incontinent and wants to not soil their bed or whatever, they jump up and try to hurry up to the bathroom. I'll tell you who does that, BPH. BPH might do that, so your benign prostatic hyperplasia patient may do that. Okay. False risk includes anybody you call yourself restraining, because they're going to try to get out of that restraint. A bunch of IV lines, drains, tubing anywhere. Just being on O2 at the house is a huge false risk. Okay. So this is stuff you already know. Dementia is a false risk.